Thank God. Okay.
Okay. Today we're going to start on the bottom of Lamed Aleph. Bottom of Lamed Aleph, Amud Beis. That's 31b. Okay. And a machlekes between Reb Nassan and the Rabbanan. If you need kavana for shchita, if a regular shchita requires kavana, Reb Nassan was more lenient, and the Rabbanan was machmer. This is talking about if someone throws a knife against the wall and it ends up shechting. So Reb Nassim would say that's a kosher shchita, and the Rabbanan would say it's not. Anyway, the bottom line of Lamed Aleph Amud Beis starts Amarava. We thank Hashem that you're able to learn Torah every day. The schus of our learning, we should have the base of Mikdash immediately. Starts like this: Amarava shachat para v'shachat behima acheres ima l'divrei kol psula. So there's two possible problems that could occur with shechting of paraduma. One is that if you shech two paradumas together, that negates them both. They both become invalid, and the reason for that is because it says v'shachat isa b'lei chaverta. You can't have two shchitas of the paraduma as once. You only shecht it. Another problem is that you can't do malacha while you're doing the shchita. You can't do anything else, and when you do something else together with it, because it's distracting, so you're going to end up not having kavana for the para, and that's going to invalidate it as well. So over here you have both problems. You shachat para, and you also shachat behema acheres. You shechted another animal together. Now, what was that other animal? That other animal was chulin. So the original din that we knew would be a problem would be two para adumas, but here it's chulin, and the chiddush is it's puzzle. It's puzzle. The para aduma is puzzle. The other animal, of course, is going to be kosher. Okay, now it gets interesting. Nishchata behima acheresima. The difference between shachat means when you did it with intention versus nishchata means you did it without intention. So let's say you're shechting the paraduma, and it turns out that you shechted another animal together with it, or a bird together with it. Here it says behima. Nishchata behima acheresima. The Reb Nassan, so according to Reb Nassan, that holds that shechita does not require kavana. So the other animal that was shechted is going to be perfectly valid according to. So the paraduma therefore is going to be puzzled because you're not allowed to do a shechita together with the shechita of the para. So because it says v'shachat eisa, you can only shech the paraduma, not something else. And since the other shechita is a valid shechita, it's going to be counted, and therefore it's going to invalidate the para. So it says l'Rab Nassan para psula behem ksher. According to Rab Nassan, the para is going to be puzzle because the behemoth is going to be kosher. However, because the Reb Nassan doesn't hold that you need kavana for the shechita, and over here you did not have kavana for the shechita, and then so the shechita is going to be kosher. That's going to invalidate the para. The Rabbanan that hold that you need kavana for shechita, then para kshera beim psula. The behema that you shechted without kavana, the other animal that you didn't have kavana, that's going to be puzzle. That's not considered a good shechita. So you don't have the problem of b'shachat isa. What about the problem of malacha? Well, you didn't have kavana for it. So the only problem of malacha is when there's kavana as well. Because the problem of malacha doing work together with the paraduma is because you're mesiach das from the paraduma. But if you don't have kavana for the other work that you're doing, it just happens, alongside. So then that's not going to invalidate the paraduma. So according to the Rabbanan, the par is ksheira behema psula, but the behema is going to be possible because you didn't have kavana when you shechted the animal. The Rabbanan hold you need kavana. What's this pshita? It's a little complex, but it's still obvious. You didn't tell me any chiddush. Where says no, interesting. Actually, the chiddush is the very first the case like this. Nishchata behema acheres l'Rab Nassan it's shichalei. Nishchata behema acheres is going to be the chiddush when you shechted without kavana. Kasalka daitcha mina could have entered your mind to say, it says if the whole issue is just v'shachar isa, you see the very first case that we had was when you had kavana, so that we know it's going to be puzzle. But if you don't have kavana and your whole issue is just the fact that you're doing a second shchita, so that second shchita I could have thought would only be a problem if is only with another paraduma. It would only be if you're shechting two paradumas together. I could have thought that would be the original problem. But I could have thought that if you're shechting a paraduma together with another one, together with not a paraduma, but together with another animal, any animal, animal of chulin, I could have thought that maybe that's not the prohibition of v'shachat isa v'lei chaverta. Can only shecht one and not two. And that would be, I could have thought that that's only by two paradumas. But the chiddush over here is that it applies even if one is a paraduma and one is not a paraduma. Okay, that's the chiddush. So, I think it's clear if you have two dinim, one is you can't do malacha, but the problem of malacha is only if there's kavana, only with intention. And the other problem is you can't do a shchita, and that problem is only if it's a valid shchita. That's the rule over here. That's how it's working out. And the chiddush of all of this is that you can't do a second shchita together with the paraduma, even if it's not a second paraduma. Chotach tala asima dirikal psula. If when you're shechting the paraduma, you want to save time, and then maybe you have a long knife, and you have also the last is like a pumpkin or a gourd. And so when you're doing the shechita, you just go through and you shecht, while you're at it, you shecht the gourd together with it. So if you have kavana to cut it while you're doing it, so that's a regular malacha. And regular malacha together with the paraduma would invalidate it. Let's say nechtaka dalasima, let's say it happened to cut, you didn't realize that there was a gourd right there. So then, everyone says it's kosher because the two problems that you could have don't exist. One problem is that's malacha, but that's only a problem if you have kavana. Here you didn't have kavana. You didn't have intention. The other problem is that it's a shchita. You can only shecht one, not two. But so what? A gourd or a pumpkin doesn't get shchita. A gourd and pumpkin just start getting cut. So that's not a problem. Okay. Mishnah says, new Mishnah. Nafla sakin v'igbiya. If the knife fell and you picked it up. Now the problem is not that the knife fell and picked it up. The problem is that in between the knife falling and picking it up, you delayed. You were shaha. This is called shia. It's a problem in shchita. One of the 5 laws of shchita is that you're not allowed to interrupt it with a delay. You can't pause. You're going to see in the Gemara how long. Naflu kelavig bia. Let's say his clothing fell and he lifted them up. Maybe it fell off him, or maybe it fell in the way. Hishchaz asasakin v'of b'chaver v'shachat. Let's say before the shchita he was busy sharpening the knife, and by now he's exhausted. In the middle of the shchita he couldn't even finish it. So his friend comes and finishes the shchita for him. Imshah kadei shchita. All of these cases, it's interesting that we have all cases that are basically the same halacha. It's just scenarios. If you waited the amount of time of a shchita, then psula. So the amount of time of an interruption is the amount of time of another shchita. You're doing a shchita. What's an interruption in the shchita? A shchita, another shchita. Reb Shimon says, Imshah kadei bikur. Reb Shimon says, no, not another shchita. It's the amount of time to check. We're going to see in the Gemara what it means to check. Okay. I'm going to have to run out in a minute. I'm going to have to put it on pause and just do attendance and come back. My kedei shchita. What does it mean, kedei shchita? Amarav kedei shchita spehima acheres. Kedei shchita means the pause, the amount of a shchita. How long is that? That's the amount of another animal. Now Rashi points out what's what are we saying over here? That it's the shechita of another animal, of course, the shechita of another animal, of course. Says you could have thought that maybe it means the amount to finish this shechita, because you're in the middle of a shechita, and it would take you, let's say a whole shechita takes 5 seconds. You did already 2.5 seconds of the shechita, and then you paused. So the amount of a shechita now would be, to finish the shechita, would be 2.5 seconds. So if you pause for 2.5 seconds, you could have thought that that's possible. Comes along Rav and says, no, it's a full 5 seconds pause. It's a full other animal pause of a full other animal shechita. That would be a hefsek. It would be a shehiyah. So Amrav kadei shchitas behem acheres. Amri la Rav Kana v'Rav Asi l'Rav. Kadei shchitas behema lebehema v'oif loif. Idil maf behema loif. Rav Kana and Rav Asi, they're students of Rav. When Rav taught this halacha, so they asked him an interesting question. He said, when the amount of time it takes to do a shchita on another animal is considered a hefsek, that's a shchita when you're shechting an animal. But what about if you're shechting a bird? Should the amount of time to be a hefsek, to be a shia, would be the amount of time it takes to shecht a bird, which let's say that's 2 seconds, or is it the amount of time that it takes to shecht an animal? Because you said the amount of time it takes to animal is 5 seconds, even though the whole bird is only, so that would be a big kula that a shehiyah by a bird is the amount of time of an animal. Amalahu, so Rav says back to Rav Kana and Rav Asi, these are the two students of Rav, he says, I wasn't so comfortable, I wasn't so confident when I would learn this halacha from my uncle. Chavivi means my uncle, Rav Chia. Rav was a nephew of Rav Chia from both his father and his mother, which because his father and mother were half. I don't know if it's called half sister, half brother, sister. It's not called half because they weren't related at all. But his mother, Rav's mother, Rav didn't share the same mother or the same father. Rav's father didn't share the same mother or the same father as Reb Chia. Rav's father had the same, they shared the same father. Ava was his name. But Rav's father married Rav Chia's sister. Rav Chia's sister, he didn't share the same mother or father with Rav Chia's sister. That's how it was. So that's why he was able to marry, even though Rav Chia was Rav's brother. But this girl, Rav Chia's sister, shared the same mother. With this Rav Chia and this girl had the same mother. They didn't have the same father. So then Rav was able to marry her. Rav marries this girl, and then Rav's father marries this girl, and then Rav. So Rav is basically a nephew of Rav Chia from both his father and from his mother. Because Rav Chia is his mother's brother, and Rav Chia is his father's brother. Anyway, whatever the case is, so he says, I wasn't confident when Rav Chia taught this. Okay, now there's an itmar, but you have to give me 1 minute. I have to run out. Push pause. So we have an itmar. Itmar, a statement of Amirayim. Now, even though Rav tells Rav Kana and Rav Asi that he didn't have the confidence to ask Rav Chia, but nevertheless, we're going to see Rav's opinion here. Amar Rav, kadei shchitas behema lebehema v'oif loif. The way that you have an interruption between a shchita is the amount of time that it takes to do exactly what you're doing. So if you're shechting an animal and you pause in the middle of the shchita, the amount of time that it would take to shecht an animal, so then that would be considered a shia, a pause, a hefsek. If you were shechting a bird, then and you pause the amount of time to shecht even another bird, let's say that's 2 seconds, so then that would be a hefsek, a shia for the bird. So you don't have to wait. In order to invalidate the shechita, it doesn't have to be the 5 seconds it takes to shecht an animal. It's because you're shechting a bird, it's the amount of time it takes to shecht the bird. Exactly what you're doing. It's interesting that the hefsek by by other things is the amount of time it takes to do exactly that thing. Like, for example, a hefsek in Shema would be the amount of time it takes to say the whole Shema. The hefsek in when you take off your talis, the amount of time it takes that you're going to need to say another bracha is the amount of time you usually wear the talis for, which is either 2 or 3 hours, right? 2 or 3 hours, depending on weekday or Shabbos. Shabbos would be probably 3 hours, and weekday maybe 2 hours, or less, an hour and a half or whatever. But yeah, so that's the amount of time it takes. So that's what, according to Rav, that's what would come out over here as well. Shmuel Amar afilu behema life. Shmuel is a lenient opinion. He says that what's considered a hefsek, a shehiyah, a pause in a shechita, that would be 5 seconds, even if you're shechting a bird. Yeah. Ravin, he came and Ravin brought statements from Rabbi Yechanan. His statements were usually accurate. And his statement was that even if you're shechting a bird, the shehiyah would only be if it would be the amount of time it takes to shecht an animal. Rabbi Chanina Amar, Rabbi Chanina is here it says Hanani, on the side it says Chanina. Chanina is Rabbi Chanina Bar Chama. He is a sort of a teacher of Rabbi Yechanan, and he's a student of Rabbi. His opinion was that Kadesh Yavi Behema Acheres V'Yishchit, the amount of time it takes to bring another animal and to shecht it. So it's not just the shechita, but you have to actually bring it. The Gemara says, Yavi, Afilim Alma, how far are you bringing it? There's no defined time. It says Nasata Devrach L'Shiurim. You set this up for every scenario is going to have a different amount of time. We don't like to make halachas like that where the amount of time is not defined. So it's like saying how big is a piece of string. You don't have anything set because where are you bringing it from? So the Gemara says, Amar of Papa, imedas lahatal kibina. You're not bringing it from anywhere. What Rabbi Chanina meant was that the animal is standing up, but you have to put it in a position to do the shechita. It means you have to flip it over, you have to put it on the ground. So when the animal is standing, Rabbi Chanina adds in that how long is a pause for shechita? You're in the middle of shechita. The amount of time it takes to take the animal down, to put it on the ground, and also to shecht it. So we said 5 seconds would be the shechita, put it on the ground maybe another 5 seconds. So Rabbi Chanina adds in that that preparatory time into the amount of time for Shia. Amri b'marav mishmid Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. In the west, which means the west for Bavel was Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, they said in the name of Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina is really a student and friend, a student of Rabbi Yechanan. He says, "Kadesh yagbiana v'yarbitzena v'yishchei daka ledaka v'gasa legasa." That's interesting. When it comes to the actual shechita itself, we're looking at each animal. There's smaller animals, there's larger animals, and the same would apply to a bird. The amount of time that would be a shia would be the amount of time it takes to shecht the bird, if you're shechting a bird, or a small animal for a small animal. The only thing is, he throws in that you also have to lift it up and turn it over together with it. But that amount of time, in other words, we're not saying that it's set an animal across the board. It's each thing has its own time, but he does throw in the Rabbi Chanina, measurement. Now Rashi over here says that apparently Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina is holding like Rav in that aspect. So Rashi says, therefore, even though usually Rav or Rabbi Yechanan we paskin like Rabbi Yechanan, but over here, since Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina is following Rav, we're going to go like Rav. I guess because of the majority. Amar Rava. Rava says, a sheichet b'sakin ra, if you're using a dull knife, and you're going back and forth, This is a big problem. He's got to get his knife sharpened. It's taking him all day. All day he's doing a shechita, back and forth. He's trying to shecht. So then ksher, it's still going to be kosher because he didn't pause. Now, boy, Rava has a question. Shows mashi starful. Let's say you pause a little, and then you pause again, and then you pause again. So you're doing the shechita, but you're stopping in the middle. I don't know, take a sip of water or something, or to adjust your sleeve, or maybe button your jacket, or to tilt your hat, or something. You may taking these small pauses here and there. The question is, if you take all those pauses together, that would add up to an amount of time which was not acceptable. But do you say that since you continued to do the shechita in between, so that interrupts the pause, you interrupted the interruption, and so therefore it should be valid or not? It's a very good question, Rav asks. So the the Gemara says, why doesn't Rav answer his own question? Since Rav said that if you can shecht the entire day, then obviously you're taking small pauses in the middle. So it's obviously it does not add up. The Gemara says, no, Hasam b'Leisha, how do you know you're taking any pauses over there? Over there, what it means is you're just going back and forth the entire day without any pauses. We don't have an answer. Let's say this question that seems like we had before. We had this before. We had it in other scenarios. But basically, if a person does a shechita to the point where it's acceptable, he shechted the majority of what he needs to shecht, which is good. He shechted the amount that he shechted was the majority of one, a majority of two. But then he pauses, and then he continues finishing the end. So really, the shechita was already valid beforehand. But because he continues the shechita, it looks like he's pausing in the middle of the shechita. So is that pause after the shechita was already acceptable, b'diavad, is that pause considered a pause that should now invalidate the entire shechita? Or do we say, well, no, if he would have stopped, it would have been kosher. But here he didn't stop, here he continued. So does that mess it up? Boy Rav Huna Brei. Okay, that was Rav Huna Brei Rav Nassan's question. The Gemara answers this question, and that doesn't answer it. It says Teiku. It leaves it as a standing question. Reb Shimon Aimer, Shimon says, Reb Shimon Yochai, he says that the amount of time of a hefsek of a shia is not considered just the amount of time it takes for the shechita. It's kedei bikar. My kedei bikar. What does it mean? The amount of time bikar. What's bikar? Bikar means to examine. What does it mean, bikar? Excuse me. Kedei bikurei shel chacham. The amount of time it takes to go to the chacham so that he could check the knife. Where it says, "In kenesat terech where's the chacham? You're going to give it an amount of time. You did this before when it came to getting an animal and putting it down, right? Remember we said you have no defined amount of time that's going to be here. Let's say the chacham is next door. Let's say it's down the block. Let's say it's in the next city. How do you define what this is supposed to be? So, elakadei bikar tabach chacham. We don't mean that you have to go to someone else to check. We're talking about that the butcher himself is a chacham. The butcher himself can check his own knife, but the amount of time it takes to check his own knife, that's going to be the amount of time. It's going to be the amount of time that would invalidate the shechita if you would pause the amount of time it takes to check. Now, the way that the checking is done, I think we learned this before, is that there were three parts to the knife. They had to check. You have to go up and down on the right side, up and down on the left side, and up and down in the center. So that could take a few seconds. Okay. We have a new Mishnah. There's two halachas that the shechita accomplishes. One thing is that it makes the food edible, Another thing is that the shechita makes it that the animal is not going to be a nevela. It won't give off impurity. Shechita, it purifies if it would just have died, then it would be a carcass which would give off impurity. But because you did a shechita, so not only can you eat the animal, but it doesn't give off any impurity. So maybe the opposite. Not only doesn't give off impurity, you can even eat. Now, sometimes there's problems with the shechita, and what we're looking for here is, I know that you're not going to be able to eat it, but will it still help you for the impurity part? Will it still purify the animal that it doesn't give off the impurity? So let's say over here, shachet asaveshet, pasuk asagageres. He did a good shechita on the veshet, which is the esophagus, but when it came to the gargeres, he dislocated it from where it's attached to on the top. Or first he dislocated the gargeres, and then he shechs the veshet, shechs the esophagus. So those are opposites there.
Rabbi, isn't the veshet the trachea? I thought
No,
the
the
veshet was
veshet
the
is the
trachea.
food pipe.
Okay, my mistake.
Yeah, because the veshet is the
The trachea is a windpipe, Dr. Stein.
Yeah, I know, but I thought that was the veshet, and gargaris was, I thought, the
I know it sounds like it because gargara sounds like you're gargling and swallowing,
Yeah.
right?
Okay, if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. Right back.
It says the veshet is the one that if there's a teensy hole, it's already a treifa, and the gargaris, the gargaris is the kana, right? Yeah, I'll read it from there's a quote in Shachet. One cut the gullet, and he severed the windpipe. So the gullet is the esophagus, right? That's the veshet, and the gargaris is the windpipe. So yeah, it's a little counterintuitive, but so whatever the case is, this way or that way, either he shechted it first or he dislocated it. The gargaris is the one that's dislocated. That's the trachea. That's easy that's more common for it to be dislocated, and the veshet is shechted. Or maybe he shechted one of them and then he waited for it to die. He didn't finish the other one. Or he does chalada on the next one. He sticks the knife behind in the neck and then he cuts it up the other way. That's called chalada. Rabbi Yeshiva says, Rabbi Yeshiva was one of the sages, he says, it's a nevela. Even though you did a shechita here, but since the shechita was an invalid shechita, for one reason or another, he says that the shechita does it, it's not edible, but it doesn't even allow you to, it doesn't even purify the animal. Rabbi Akiva, I'm a treifa. Rabbi Akiva says no. It did half. It accomplished half. The shechita, you can't eat it, because the animal's a treifa, but it doesn't give off impurity because a treifa doesn't give off impurity. Like if you do a regular shechita and then you check the lungs and you see that there was an adhesion in the lungs that would make it a treifa, it doesn't give off impurity. It's a treifa, but it doesn't give off impurity. So Rabbi Kiva says that it accomplishes half. Klal Amar Rabbi Yeshiva. Rabbi Yeshiva says, let me give you the rule. Mishum Rabbi Yeshua, in the name of Rabbi Yeshua. That's a teacher of Rabbi Akiva. That's Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya. He says, Kol shenifsala b'shchitasa nevela. Anything that the shechita is not valid, if it's a problem with the shechita, then we ignore the shechita. We invalidate the shechita, and so therefore there was no shechita. No shechita means that it's a nevela. However, kol shechitasa karoy v'davach garamla lipasel. Anything that you did a proper shechita, but you find out that there's something else that's wrong, like you check the lungs or something. He says that's just a treifa. But if there's an invalidation in the shechita itself, then you disqualified the shechita. Then there's no shechita. And Rabbi Akiva says, you know what? You're right. So it's interesting. We had a machlekes in the Mishnah. And then it turns out at the end of the Mishnah, there's really no machlekes. Rabbi Akiva agreed to Rabbi Sheva. Changed his mind. Rabbi Sheva gave him a convincing argument. Okay. We quote the Mishnah now, Shachar Asaveshet, then we quote the end of the Mishnah, V'haidalai, Rabbi Akiva. So our Mishnah concludes with Rabbi Akiva agreeing to Rabbi Sheva that really our Mishnah is going to be, everything is going to be in Nevela. Well, Veraminhi. That's a contradiction to what we're going to learn in the next parak. It says, Elu treifas bebehema. The following are treifas. Treifa means that it's not a nevela, right? And what are the example of a treifa? Nekuva saveshet, psukas agagaras. If you puncture the veshet, or if you dislocate the gargaras. Now, we called it a treifa. We didn't call it a nevela. Now, 1 second. I could have learned that Mishnah, and I could have said that Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva, who holds that if there's an invalidation of the shechita, something goes wrong on the neck, that it's fine. If you still did a shechita, it's a treifa, okay, but you just can't eat it. It's a treifa, but it doesn't give impurity. But we learned the end of the Mishnah where Rabbi Akiva's opinion just disappeared because Rabbi Akiva doesn't hold of his own opinion. He agreed to Rabbi Sheva. So there is no such thing as a treifa when there's a problem with the neck of the animal. That would all be an avela. So why do we call it Eila Treifas? It's a contradiction between the end of our Mishnah, where Rabbi Akiva agrees to Rabbi Sheva, and the Mishnah in the next parak, where it says that it's a treifa. Okay. Amar Rava says Leikasha. Kan sheshachat ulebesayf pasak. Kan shepasak ulebesayf shachat. Depends what happened. What happened first? So
toward the trachea.
Rava says that our Mishnah, where we said that Rabbi Akiva retracted, that's because first you shechted one siman, and then it got messed up during the shechita itself. It got dislocated. However, the Mishnah that says that it's a treifa, that's because it wasn't during the shechita that it got dislocated. It got dislocated beforehand. And then you came along to do a shechita. So it wasn't an invalidation of the shechita. We're going to call that something else caused it to become invalid. It goes like this. Shachar al-b'seif pasak, if you started to shecht, and then in the middle of the shechita it became dislocated, nifselis b'shchite, that's an invalidation of the slaughtering itself, which we know that's going to be an avela. Pasak, shachat, but however, if it first became dislocated and then you did a shechita, we're going to consider that kidavar acher garama lifasal dami. We're going to consider that became invalid because of some side reason. Okay, even though both of them have to do with the neck, are on the neck, but nevertheless we're going to say that because that happened not during the shechita, we're going to consider the shechita to be a valid shechita enough that it's not going to be an avela. Esvei Rav Acha Bar Huna l'Rava. Rav Acha Bar Huna has a question on Rava's teretz. Rava said there's a difference of which happened first. Let's say first he quotes our Mishnah. Let's say first he shechs the veshet, and then the trachea gets dislodged, dislocated. Or the opposite. Nevela. Said it's a nevela. And we have both of them going there, this way and that way. How could Rava give me a teretz and tell me that it depends which one? It depends which way it happened, when we have clearly in the Mishnah that it doesn't depend. We put both of them in the same category, and it says that it's an avela. Rabbi Sheva said it's avela, Rabbi Akiva said it's a treifa, and then we said Rabbi Akiva changed his mind. The Gemara answers, so Rava answers, gives a very weak answer. It says, Eima ukvar shachar asaveshet. The second case that we said, the first case was you shech the veshet first, and then the trachea gets dislodged. Second case is the trachea gets dislodged, and now Rava says and you've already shechted the veshet, not and then you shech the veshet, and you've already shechted the veshet, which means the veshet was shechted first. So he says, oh, if that's the case, then our Mishnah that calls it a nevela, that's only because the veshet was shechted before it got dislodged, which means that it got dislodged during the shechita, and that's why it's a nevela. So that's his answer. It's a weak answer, as you'll see in a moment. Amalei, so Rav Acha Bar Huna says to Rava, state shuvas b'davar. I'm not going to accept your answer because I have two problems with it. Chada tahinu kamaisa. Basically, the Mishnah, according to you, would be repeating the same case twice. The first case is you shech the veshet, and afterwards the trachea got dislodged. Second case is the trachea got dislodged, and you already had shechted the veshet, which means that you shechted the veshet, and afterwards the trachea got dislodged, which means that you just said the same thing twice. So it's both the same case. What was shechted first, the veshet? What happened afterwards? The trachea was dislodged. So just because you said it in a different order, it doesn't mean that you changed the statement, that you now have a new thing. It's exactly the same thing, right? V'oid hatanana v'acherkach. Also, if you take a look, it says v'acherkach, and afterwards. It doesn't say ukvar, and you already did. It says and afterwards. That means that you shechted the veshet. The pasak first the trachea gets dislodged, and afterwards you shechted. And nevertheless, it's an avela. We can't answer Rava's teretz. Elam Rava, now the Rava says that the Mishnah that we said, Elu Trefas, what it really means to say is Elu Asuris. These are prohibited. Elu Asuris Ketani. V'yesh mem nevelas v'yeshem Trefas. The following are asur. Some of them are going to be nevela, some of them are going to be trefa. There goes the whole question. It falls off just like that. The whole question was that we're calling it a trefa when Rabbi Akiva was the opinion that said that it was a trefa, changed his mind and calls it a nevela. So now how could you call it a trefa? So we say that no, it wasn't. It didn't mean that it's a trefa. We meant that it's prohibited. Some of them are going to be trefa, some of them are going to be nevela. As well, if you're quoting nevelas in that case, in that Mishnah, and you're listing nevelas, so why don't we have other cases if you have nevelas? If you cut the animal in half, you make it like a broken vessel, so that's going to be an nevela. And we could also have Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar, natla yerech v'chol, and I think it's v'chol nicker. If you take away the thigh to the extent that when it crouches down, you can actually see the cavity, the hole into the animal, so then that's going to be an avela, even if the animal's still walking around. So those are two cases where the animal's still walking around, the animal's an avela. If it's chopped in half and it's still moving, it's an avela, even if it's not dead yet. And also if it's we consider it dead even though it's alive. We consider it like a carcass. It's a nevela. Even if you're going to come along and shecht it, it's too late. It's too late. It's so far gone that it's a nevela. So if that Mishnah in Elu Trefas really meant to say that all of these are prohibited and it's going to list nevelas and trefas, then why don't you have these other two cases that are nevelas? If you say that it's only listing trefas, then I understand. But because you're trying to answer that it's listing nevelas as well, now I have a follow-up question. So why doesn't it say those two? So the answer is Kiktani, what is that Mishnah listing? Nevela d'laimatam mechaim. It's talking about nevelas. It has in there those things that are prohibited, but it doesn't. It's not giving me the cases that where it's going to be nevela even while it's alive. It's only talking about nevela after it's dead. Aval nevela d'tam mechaim like Tani. It didn't have those cases. Those two cases that you gave me are a totally different category of cases. And you ask, why doesn't it say those cases? It says because that wasn't talking about that category. That's a category of when it's even while it's alive, it's considered dead, and it's going to give us some purity. Okay, now Reb Shimon ben Lakish Amar. Reb Shimon ben Lakish has his own teretz, yeah. The contradiction between the Treifa and Nevela. He says the Rava answered the second answer that when it says Elu Treifas, it doesn't mean Elu Treifas, it really means Elu Asuras. Some of them are Treifa. But Lakish says no, Elu Treifas means Treifas. problem is that there's a distinction, though. Kan sheshachad makom chetach, kan sheshachad shlev makom chetach. It depends. If you're shechting in the exact spot where there's a problem, so then you're not resolving the situation, and it's already it's an avela. However, if you shecht in the place that's still attached, then that's going to be a good shechita. Kan sheshachad shlev makom chetach. That goes like this: shachad makom chetach. If you're shechting in the place that was already, it's called chetach, which means cut, but I think it means if it was dislocated. If you're shechting in a place that was already dislocated from its place, so then nifsla b'shchiti, then that's a problem with the shchita. Shleiv makom chetach, but if you're shechting in a place that's still good, ki davar chagarim l'vsaldami, then your shchita was a perfect shchita. We take a look at the animal, we see that there's a problem here. So that's considered something else that's causing that problem. That's not going to be a problem with the shechita. And whenever you have some other side issue that's making it puzzle, so that's not going to be an avela. That's just going to be a treifa. That's Reb Shimon ben Lakish's teretz. Gemara says, "Miyam Reb Shimon ben Lakish hachi." Reb Shimon ben Lakish really says this. Reb Shimon, does he really say this? Reb Shimon ben Lakish says, "Shachet asakana v'achkach nekfa hareya ksheira." Just 1 second. If you shecht the kana, the trachea, and afterwards, after you already shecht the trachea, a needle gets pushed into the lungs. I don't know how that happens, but someone's starting to do work already on this on the tanning process, and he ends up you didn't realize you didn't finish the shechita yet, and he ends up puncturing the lungs. You say it's ksheira. It's kosher. Alma, we see from that, we see that the lungs, after they're already severed, are totally insignificant. So why? It's like as if they're being held in a basket. It's like as if they're not part of the animal anymore because you already cut them off. So once you cut the trachea, the lungs are attached to the trachea. So then those lungs are not going to be. Those lungs won't make the animal a treifa now. It's already too late. So Hanami, in our case as well, the shechita that you're doing on the trachea was already dislocated. So even though it's not in the place where it was dislocated, but nevertheless it's already dislocated. So there shouldn't be any shechita there. Come on, the mancha b'dikuladam. It's like as if it's just in a basket. If it's just in a basket, then how could you say that that's going to make it kosher from being an avela? That's going to stop it. So it's already over. There's nothing there. Well, Mishnah Lezasim Kaima. Reb Chia Barabba says the name of Rabbi Yechon. Reb Chia Barabba is a major student of Rabbi Yechon. He says, I can answer the question. We had a problem. Our Mishnah says that Rabbi Kiva retracted. It says that he holds like Rabbi Shevav that there's no such thing as a treifa that gets messed up by the shechita. Everything is nevela, like Rabbi Shevav held. Problem is, we have a Mishnah later on that says elu treifas, and one of them is where the trachea got dislocated and and you did a shechita, and it's only a treifa. So we said, so whose opinion is that? Rabbi Akiva himself doesn't even hold of that anymore. So Rabbi Yechon answers, it's not a problem, because the first Mishnah was after Rabbi Akiva retracted. The second Mishnah was before the Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva retracted. Mishnah we left the Mishnah in place. We didn't change the Mishnah because people would memorize the Mishnah, so we didn't want to switch it on them. So even though we added in the words to an earlier Mishnah that Hadar, what does it say? Chazar Rabbi Akiva. It says V'haydalei Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva retracted, that we added in, but we didn't change the other Mishnah where it says Eilu Treifas. Okay, let's leave it over here. We're up to Gufa. Okay. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi Smith. Go watch those kids. They're probably killing each other.
Let's hope not.